Before we dive into this emotional journey, if you're enjoying stories that touch your heart and make you think, consider subscribing to the channel. Real-life dramas like the one you're about to hear deserve to be shared, and with your support, we can bring more of these powerful narratives to light. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Martha Donovan's front porch as she balanced two grocery bags in her arms. At 68, she moved with the deliberate care of someone who had learned that rushing only led to mistakes. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and laugh lines framed her eyes, evidence of a life filled with as much joy as sorrow. "Almost there," she murmured to herself, fishing for her house keys in her purse while keeping the bags steady. The familiar weight of the brass keyring had been a comfort for over 40 years. This house on Maple Street wasn't just a structure of wood and stone. It was the vessel that contained her entire life story. When her fingers finally closed around the keys, Martha sighed with relief and approached the door that had welcomed her home countless times before. But when she inserted the key into the lock, something felt wrong. The key wouldn't turn. She tried again, more carefully this time, but the result was the same. "That's strange," she whispered, setting her groceries down on the porch swing. Perhaps she had grabbed the wrong key. Martha examined her keyring, but no, this was definitely the right one. The same key that had opened this door since Richard had carried her across the threshold as newlyweds. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. Martha stepped back and looked at her front door with new eyes. The hardware looked different, shinier, newer. The locks had been changed. Martha's heart began to race as she rang the doorbell, hoping against hope that there was a simple explanation. When the door finally swung open, her son Michael stood there, his 6-foot frame blocking the entrance to her home. At 35, he had his father's strong jaw and her own hazel eyes. But lately, those eyes had grown cold when they looked at her. "Mom," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." Martha stared at him, confusion and dread forming a knot in her stomach. "Michael, my key doesn't work. What's going on?" He cleared his throat and straightened his designer tie, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "I think we need to talk about the future, Mom. Your future. I've made some changes." "Changes? To my house?" Her voice rose slightly. "Michael, let me in. Those groceries need to go in the fridge." Instead of stepping aside, Michael leaned against the doorframe. Behind him, Martha caught glimpses of movement, boxes being carried, furniture being shifted. Her furniture. "The thing is, Mom, we've been over this. The real estate market is booming right now. This house is sitting on land that's worth a fortune, and you're rattling around in it all alone." Martha felt her knees weaken. They had indeed had this conversation before, many times in fact, but she had been clear each time. "This is my home, Michael. Your father and I built our lives here. Every corner holds memories I can't replace. Memories don't pay bills, Mum. Dad's been gone for 5 years now. It's time to be practical." Martha caught movement from the corner of her eye and realized her 8-year-old grandson, Ethan, had appeared in the hallway behind Michael. The boy's face lit up when he saw her. "Grandma," he called out, waving enthusiastically. For a moment, Martha's heart lifted, but Michael turned and with a stern voice said, "Ethan, go help your mother upstairs." The boy's smile faltered and he disappeared back into the house. When Michael turned back to Martha, his expression had hardened. "I've made arrangements for you to stay at Golden Sunset Assisted Living. It's a very nice place. I've already moved some of your things there." Martha felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The grocery bags lay forgotten on the porch as the full impact of what was happening hit her. Her own son was locking her out of her home. The home where she had raised him, where she had nursed his father through his final illness, where every scratch on the banister and stain on the carpet told the story of their family. "You can't do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This house is in my name." Michael's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We can discuss all the legal details later. For now, I think it's best if you take some time to adjust to the idea. Change is hard, I know. Michael, please. Martha reached out to touch his arm, but he stepped back. I'll have someone drive you to Golden Sunset. They're expecting you. He started to close the door. Wait, Martha cried, desperation rising in her throat. My photos, my papers, my life is in there. We'll sort through everything, don't worry. I'll make sure you get what you need. The door closed with a soft click that sounded to Martha like the end of the world. She stood frozen on the porch, staring at the door that had just closed on 40 years of her life. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of Michael on his phone, already moving on with his plans, while her world collapsed around her. Martha's hands trembled as she picked up her purse. Inside was her phone, her wallet, and precious little else. Everything that mattered was locked behind that door. The quilt her mother had made, Richard's letters from when they were dating, the growth chart marked on the kitchen wall where she had tracked Michael's height year after year. As she slowly descended the steps of what was no longer her home, Martha felt the first tear slide down her cheek. But beneath the shock and heartbreak, something else stirred, a quiet determination that had seen her through life's hardest moments. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. 3 days later, Martha sat in her sparse room at Golden Sunset Assisted Living, staring at the generic landscape painting on the wall. The place wasn't terrible, clean, adequately staffed, with decent food, but it wasn't home. The bed was too firm, the air smelled of disinfectant, and the walls were too thin. At night, she could hear her neighbor's television and the nurse's quiet conversations in the hallway. She had called her friend Eleanor the moment she arrived, spilling out the whole terrible story through tears of humiliation and grief. Eleanor had immediately offered her spare bedroom, but Martha had declined. She needed time to think, to plan. Whatever game Michael was playing, she needed to understand the rules before making her next move. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly straightening her posture and wiping away any trace of tears. The door opened to reveal Lisa, Michael's wife, holding a small suitcase. "Hello, Martha," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I brought you some more clothes and a few things from the house." Martha nodded stiffly. She and Lisa had never been close, but the younger woman had always been polite at least. Now, Martha wondered if Lisa had been part of this plan all along. "Thank you," Martha said, watching as Lisa set the suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a few paperback novels, and a small photo album. "How are you settling in?" Lisa asked, her voice carrying the forced cheerfulness of someone visiting a sick relative. "As well as can be expected when you've been evicted from your own home," Martha replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Lisa had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Michael means well, Martha. He just wants what's best for everyone." "What's best for Michael, you mean?" Martha took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Where is my grandson? I haven't seen Ethan since that day." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed Lisa's face. "He misses you. He keeps asking when he can visit his grandma's house." "This isn't my house," Martha said quietly, "and you know it." Lisa busied herself with smoothing out non-existent wrinkles in the bedspread. "Michael has been under a lot of pressure at work. The development deal he's been working on could make his career, but he needs capital. The property on Maple Street—" "My home," Martha interrupted, "is prime real estate now. The neighborhood has changed so much in the last decade. The offer he received was substantial." Martha's hands clenched into fists in her lap. "So he decided to sell my house out from under me, the house that Richard and I paid off 20 years ago, the house that is legally in my name." Lisa wouldn't meet her eyes. "He was going to talk to you about it again, but after your last conversation, when you flatly refused, he felt backed into a corner. So he changed my locks and moved me to a nursing home without my consent." Martha's voice rose slightly. "Is that what people do when they feel backed into a corner?" A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Michael wanted me to give you this. It's an invitation to dinner tomorrow night. At the house. He says it's time to discuss things properly as a family. Martha took the envelope, turning it over in her hands. A reconciliation dinner? After what he did? Lisa shrugged, already moving toward the door. He says it's important, that there's a way forward that works for everyone. She paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, I told him there were better ways to handle this. After Lisa left, Martha sat for a long time with the unopened envelope in her hands. Part of her wanted to tear it to pieces, to refuse any olive branch from the son who had betrayed her so completely. But another part, the part that had rocked Michael to sleep through countless nights of childhood fevers and teenage heartbreaks, couldn't extinguish the flicker of hope that there was still a path back to the relationship they had once shared. With trembling fingers, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was a cream-colored card with elegant script, a family dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Let's find our way back to each other. Martha traced the words with her fingertip, noting that it wasn't even Michael's handwriting, probably some secretary at his firm. The impersonal nature of the invitation only deepened her hurt, but she set the card on her nightstand nevertheless. As night fell, Martha unpacked the suitcase Lisa had brought. Each item she pulled out felt like a poor substitute for what had been left behind. The small photo album contained only recent pictures. Nothing from Michael's childhood, nothing of Richard. It was as if Michael was trying to erase their shared past. At the bottom of the suitcase, wrapped in tissue paper, was a surprise. The small crystal figurine of two birds that had sat on her bedroom dresser for decades. Richard had given it to her on their first anniversary. Martha held it to her chest, grateful for this one piece of her real life that had made its way to her. That night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the strange sounds of her new temporary residence, Martha made a decision. She would go to the dinner. She would hear what Michael had to say, but she would not be the same trusting mother who had been blindsided once before. This time, she would be prepared. Reaching for her phone, she made a call to the one person she knew could help her navigate what was coming next. As the line connected, Martha felt a strange calm settle over her. "Hello, Thomas. It's Martha Donovan. I need your help with something important. It's about Michael and what he's done." The following evening, Martha stood outside her own front door, feeling like a stranger. She had taken extra care with her appearance. Her silver hair arranged in a neat twist, her best navy dress complemented by the pearl necklace Richard had given her on their 30th anniversary. She would not appear defeated. Her finger hovered over the doorbell. Once, she would have walked right in, calling out a cheerful greeting. Now, she was a guest, an outsider. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through her heart, but she pushed it aside and rang the bell. Michael opened the door, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, his smile too wide, too rehearsed. "Mom, you came. I'm glad." Martha nodded stiffly, stepping past him into the foyer. The house smelled different, less like the lavender sachets she had always kept in the linen closet and more like the expensive candles Lisa favored. Some furniture had been rearranged, and the walls that had once displayed family photos now featured modern art prints. "We're in the dining room," Michael said, guiding her with a light touch on her elbow that she shrugged off. "Everyone's waiting." "Everyone?" Martha questioned, but Michael had already moved ahead, leading the way to the formal dining room they had only used for holidays and special occasions. When she entered, Martha stopped short. The large mahogany table was set elegantly with the fine china she had inherited from her mother. But instead of the family gathering she had expected, 3 unfamiliar faces looked up at her. Men in expensive suits, with leather portfolios placed beside their water glasses. "Mom," Michael said smoothly, "these are my associates. Mr. Bennett from the law firm, Mr. Huang from the real estate development company, and Mr. Cartwright, my financial advisor." Martha felt a chill run through her. This was no reconciliation dinner, it was an ambush. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, looking around for her grandson. And Lisa? Lisa took Ethan to his friend's house for a sleepover, Michael replied, pulling out a chair for her. I thought it would be better if we could speak freely, adult to adult. Martha remained standing, suddenly very aware of how outnumbered she was. I thought this was a family dinner, Michael. You said we would talk, just us. And we will, he assured her, his tone patronizing. These gentlemen are just here to help facilitate our discussion and make everything official. Please sit down. Chef Andre has prepared your favorite, beef Wellington. Reluctantly, Martha took the offered seat, noting how the three men watched her with calculating eyes. The table had been set with fine crystal glasses, and a bottle of expensive wine was already open, breathing. The performance of normalcy was almost impressive. Mrs. Donovan, Mr. Bennett began, his voice smooth as oil. Your son has explained your situation to us, and we all agree that at your age, managing such a large property alone is unnecessary. The stress, the maintenance costs. I manage just fine, Martha interrupted firmly, and my financial situation is none of your concern. Michael cleared his throat. Mom, please, we're trying to help. A young man in chef's whites appeared, serving the first course, a delicate mushroom soup that Martha would normally have enjoyed. Now it turned to ash in her mouth as Mr. Bennett continued outlining all the reasons why she should simplify her life. As the main course was served, Michael finally got to the point. We've drawn up some papers, he said, nodding to Mr. Huang, who slid a document across the table. A power of attorney, comprehensive. It would allow me to manage your affairs going forward. Martha stared at the thick document, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. You want me to sign over control of everything to you. My house, my savings, my life. It's for your own protection, Michael insisted. What if you fell? What if you became ill? This way I can step in immediately, make medical decisions, handle your finances. Sell my home, Martha finished for him. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You want legal authority to sell this house to your developers. Mr. Cartwright spoke up, his tone reasonable. The offer on the table is exceptional, Mrs. Donovan. Your son is simply trying to capitalize on this opportunity while ensuring your comfort for the rest of your life. Martha set down her fork, her appetite gone. And if I refuse? A silence fell over the table. Michael exchanged glances with his associates before fixing his gaze on his mother. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, he said quietly. But you should know that Ethan has been asking about you. He misses his grandmother terribly. It would be a shame if your stubbornness prevented you from being part of his life as he grows up. The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. Martha felt her breath catch. He was using her love for her grandson as leverage, knowing it was the one thing she couldn't bear to lose. You would keep Ethan from me? She whispered, hardly able to believe her son capable of such cruelty. I'm simply saying that family harmony is important, Michael replied, not quite meeting her eyes. Lisa and I are in agreement that stability is crucial for Ethan's development. Ongoing conflict between us would only confuse and upset him. Martha looked around the table at the four men watching her, waiting for her to crumble under the weight of their combined pressure. In that moment, she felt smaller and more alone than she ever had before. Even when Richard died, she had Michael at her side. Now, the son she had raised with all the love in her heart was threatening to take away the only family she had left unless she surrendered everything. Something shifted inside Martha then. A quiet transformation from shock and hurt to a slow burning resolve. She reached for her water glass with a steady hand, took a deliberate sip, and carefully set it back down. I see, she said simply. So these are your terms. My home and financial independence in exchange for access to my grandson. Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he nodded. I'm trying to be practical, Mom. This solution works for everyone. Martha folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. I'd like to review the document before signing anything. The three associates exchanged satisfied glances. Mr. Bennett slid the power of attorney closer to her, along with an expensive pen. "Take your time," he said condescendingly. "We can explain any legal terminology you find confusing." Martha picked up the document, leafing through its many pages with deliberate care. The room grew quiet, except for the soft clink of silverware as the men returned to their meals, confident in their victory. After several minutes, Martha placed the document back on the table and reached for her purse. The men watched expectantly as she took out her phone. "Before I make any decisions," she said calmly, "there's someone I'd like to consult." Michael frowned, setting down his wine glass. "Mom, everything you need to know is right here. These gentlemen can answer any questions you might have." Martha shook her head slightly as she scrolled through her contacts. "I appreciate that, but I'd prefer a second opinion from someone who represents my interests, not yours." "At this hour?" Michael scoffed. "Who could you possibly be calling?" Martha's finger hovered over a name, and a small, knowing smile touched her lips. "Someone who knows exactly what's happening here." Before Michael could object further, Martha pressed the call button and put the phone to her ear. The table fell silent as the men exchanged uncertain glances. "Hello, Thomas." "Yes, I'm here now," Martha said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "Yes, they've presented it. I think it's time you joined us." She ended the call and placed her phone on the table, folding her hands calmly in her lap. "He'll be here momentarily." Michael's face had drained of color. "Thomas? Thomas who?" As if in answer to his question, the doorbell rang. Michael jumped slightly, then looked at his mother with dawning suspicion. "I'll get that," Martha said, rising from her chair with newfound confidence. The three associates remained seated, confusion evident on their faces, but Michael followed her to the door, his stride betraying his agitation. When Martha opened the front door, a tall, distinguished man in his 60s stood on the porch. His silver hair and beard were neatly trimmed, and his eyes, sharp and intelligent, softened when they fell on Martha. "Right on time," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I was parked just down the street," Thomas replied, his deep voice carrying an authority that filled the foyer. "Waiting for your call." Michael had frozen in the hallway, his face a mask of shock and growing alarm. "Judge Thomas Reynolds," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, what is this?" Martha gestured toward the dining room. "Shall we rejoin your associates? I think they should be part of this conversation." When they returned to the dining room, the three men had risen to their feet, sensing that something had shifted dramatically. Mr. Bennett was the first to recover, extending his hand to the newcomer. "Judge Reynolds, this is unexpected. I'm Charles Bennett, of Bennett, Wolfe and Associates." Thomas shook his hand briefly. "I know who you are, Mr. Bennett. Your reputation precedes you, not always favorably in my courtroom." Bennett's professional smile faltered slightly. Thomas turned to Martha, his expression gentle. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "Better now?" Michael stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Judge Reynolds, I'm not sure why my mother has involved you in a private family matter, but—" "I involved Thomas because he is an old friend," Martha interrupted, "and because he happens to specialize in elder law and cases of financial exploitation." The word exploitation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Thomas placed his briefcase on an empty chair and addressed the room. "Gentlemen, I've reviewed the situation at Mrs. Donovan's request. Changing locks to deny a homeowner access to their primary residence, removing personal property without consent, and attempting to coerce signing of a power of attorney through emotional manipulation and threats regarding family access are serious matters." Mr. Huang began gathering his papers. "Perhaps we should reconvene another time." "Perhaps you shouldn't reconvene at all," Thomas suggested, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Mrs. Donovan has already filed a police report regarding the unauthorized changing of her locks and removal of her property. She has also initiated a restraining order preventing any further attempts to remove her belongings or transfer property titles without her explicit witnessed consent." Michael's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. I was trying to help her. She's too old to maintain this place alone. I'm 68, Michael, not 98, Martha said quietly. And this house has been my home for 40 years. Your father and I worked hard to pay it off so that we would always have security in our later years. Thomas opened his briefcase and removed a folder. I've also taken the liberty of researching the development company Mr. Huang represents. Interesting that they've been trying to acquire properties on this block for over a year, and that your real estate firm, Mr. Donovan, stands to make a substantial commission on the assembled parcel. Michael's jaw tightened. It's a legitimate business opportunity. One that apparently justified locking your mother out of her own home, Thomas asked, his eyebrow raised. The three associates were now actively gathering their things, eager to distance themselves from what was clearly becoming a legal minefield. Mr. Bennett muttered something about family miscommunication as he slipped the power of attorney document back into his portfolio. Martha watched them prepare to leave with a strange sense of detachment. Part of her had hoped that when confronted, Michael would show remorse, would reveal that he had somehow been pressured into this scheme. But the hard set of his jaw and the cold calculation in his eyes told her everything she needed to know about his priorities. "Gentlemen," Thomas said firmly, "before you go, I want to be clear. Any further attempts to pressure Mrs. Donovan or to interfere with her property will result in immediate legal action against all parties involved." The associates nodded their understanding, making hasty exits with mumbled apologies. Michael remained standing at the head of the table, his dinner forgotten, his plans in ruins. When they were alone, Martha, Thomas, and Michael, the silence was heavy with unspoken emotions. Martha looked at her son, really looked at him, trying to reconcile the ambitious, ruthless man before her with the boy she had raised. "Why, Michael?" she finally asked, her voice soft with genuine bewilderment. Was the money really worth all of this? Michael's expression hardened. "You don't understand the opportunity here. This development deal could set us up for life, you included. You're being selfish, clinging to this old house when it could provide security for all of us, for Ethan's future." "This house is my security," Martha replied, "and I would have helped with Ethan's future anyway. You know that. All you had to do was ask, not steal." "I didn't steal anything." "You took my home, Michael. You took my dignity. And worst of all, you tried to use my love for Ethan as a weapon against me." Martha's voice broke slightly. "That's something I never thought you capable of." Thomas placed a supportive hand on Martha's shoulder, and she drew strength from his presence. "Michael, your mother will be returning to her home tonight. I suggest you make arrangements to stay elsewhere until you've removed your belongings." Michael looked between them, realization dawning. "You two, are you—" "Oh," Martha shook her head. "Thomas is a dear friend who lost his wife around the same time I lost your father. We've been supporting each other through grief, nothing more. Though I'm not sure why my personal relationships would be any of your concern at this point." "So that's it?" Michael asked bitterly. "You're choosing this house over your own son?" "No, Michael, you chose money over your own mother," Martha corrected him gently. "And until you understand the difference, I think it's best we keep our distance." Michael's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Without another word, he stormed out of the dining room. Moments later, they heard the front door slam with such force that the crystal chandelier above the table trembled. Martha sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a heart heavy with loss. Thomas sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You did well, Martha. Very well indeed." She looked around the dining room, at the abandoned meal, the scattered wine glasses, the emptiness where family should have been. "I've lost him, haven't I?" Thomas took her hand gently. "Perhaps for now, but you've stood your ground with dignity and courage. That's something he'll have to reckon with in time." Martha nodded slowly, allowing herself to accept the truth of his words. She had won this battle, But the war for her son's heart, for the family they had once been, was far from over. The next morning, Martha stood in her kitchen, running her fingers along the worn countertop that had witnessed countless family meals, holiday preparations, and late-night conversations. Thomas had helped her move back in the night before, after making sure Michael had left with his essential belongings. The house felt different now, as if the very walls had absorbed the betrayal that had unfolded within them. Martha made coffee in the same ceramic pot she had used for decades, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. As she waited for it to brew, she noticed a child's drawing magnetized to the refrigerator, Ethan's artwork from his last visit before everything fell apart. A simple crayon rendering of Grandma's house, with two stick figures holding hands in front of it. Her heart constricted at the sight. A gentle knock at the back door interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Lisa standing on the porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Martha hesitated only briefly before opening the door. "Martha," Lisa said, her voice uncertain. "I hope it's okay that I came by." Martha nodded, stepping aside to let her daughter-in-law enter. "The coffee's just finished brewing. Would you like some?" Lisa nodded, taking a seat at the kitchen table, the same table where the family had shared countless breakfasts together. For a moment, neither woman spoke as Martha poured 2 cups and set one before Lisa. "I didn't know," Lisa finally said, staring into her coffee. "About changing the locks, about moving you out like that. I mean, I knew Michael wanted to sell the house eventually, but not like this." Martha studied her daughter-in-law's face, looking for signs of deception. Finding none, she sighed softly. "When did you find out?" "After it was done," Lisa admitted. "He told me he'd convinced you to try the assisted living facility for a while. By the time I realized what had really happened, he had already contacted the developers and started moving things." Martha wrapped her hands around her warm mug, anchoring herself. "And the dinner? The power of attorney? Did you know about that?" Lisa shook her head, shame evident in her downcast eyes. "Not until yesterday afternoon. Michael said it was just a formality, that you had already verbally agreed. When I questioned him, he got angry, said I didn't understand business." She looked up, meeting Martha's gaze directly. "That's why I took Ethan to his friend's house. I couldn't let him see that, whatever that was." A heavy silence settled between them. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, and the familiar sounds of the street, mail being delivered, children playing, filtered in through the open window. Life continuing as normal, even when nothing felt normal anymore. "How is Ethan?" Martha finally asked, the question that mattered most to her. Lisa's expression softened. "Confused, upset. He doesn't understand why he couldn't see you, why we suddenly moved some of our things here, why his dad has been so tense. He keeps asking when things will go back to normal." "I'd like to see him," Martha said. "Whatever is happening between Michael and me shouldn't affect Ethan." Lisa nodded quickly. "Of course. Actually, that's partly why I came. Ethan has a baseball game this Saturday. He'd love it if you could come. Michael will be there too, but—" She trailed off. "But it's a public place. Neutral ground," Martha finished for her. "I think that would be good, for Ethan's sake." Lisa visibly relaxed, taking a sip of her coffee. Then, hesitantly, she reached across the table and placed her hand over Martha's. "I'm sorry, Martha. Truly. I should have done more. Said something sooner." Martha didn't pull away, but she didn't return the gesture either. "Michael makes his own choices, Lisa, as do you, as do I." They finished their coffee in a silence that was neither comfortable nor entirely hostile. The silence of 2 women connected by family bonds that had been strained but not completely severed. As Lisa rose to leave, she paused at the door. "There's something else you should know. Michael's company is in trouble. The development deal, it wasn't just about opportunity. He's overextended, took risks that didn't pay off. This property assemblage was supposed to be his way out." Martha absorbed this information with a quiet nod. It didn't excuse what Michael had done, but it helped her understand the desperation behind his actions. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. After Lisa left, Martha spent the day slowly moving through her house, taking inventory of what remained and what had been removed during her brief exile. Some furniture was gone, replaced with newer pieces that didn't match the character of the home. Many of her personal items had been boxed up and stored in the basement. Family photos, Richard's books, the holiday decorations they had collected over 40 years of marriage. By evening, she had reclaimed the most important spaces. Her bedroom, the kitchen, the living room, with its comfortable old sofa where she had read countless stories to Michael as a child, and later to Ethan. She had hung back up the family photos that Michael had removed, restoring the visual history of their lives together. As night fell, Martha sat on the porch swing, listening to the familiar creaking of its chains and watching the neighborhood settle into evening routines. Lights came on in windows, families gathered for dinner, children were called in from play, the same rhythms that had comforted her for decades. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Thomas. "Everything all right?" Martha smiled slightly as she typed her reply. "Getting there. One day at a time." She looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. The same stars she and Richard had gazed at on summer evenings. The same stars under which she had rocked a colicky baby Michael. The same stars that would continue to shine long after all their human dramas had played out. For the first time since the locks were changed, Martha felt truly at home again. The house had withstood this latest storm, just as it had weathered all the joys and sorrows of her life. And whatever came next, whether reconciliation with Michael or a new chapter without him, she would face it with the same resilience that had carried her this far. Saturday morning arrived with perfect baseball weather. Clear skies, a gentle breeze, and sunshine that warmed without scorching. Martha dressed carefully in comfortable slacks and a light sweater, pinning to her collar the small baseball-shaped brooch that Ethan had given her for Christmas. She wanted him to know she remembered, that the small gestures of love between them mattered. Thomas had offered to accompany her, but Martha had declined. This was something she needed to do alone, this first careful step toward whatever new family dynamic might emerge from the rubble of betrayal. The community baseball field was already buzzing with activity when Martha arrived. Parents set up folding chairs along the sidelines, siblings chased each other through the grass, and coaches gathered their young players for pre-game instructions. Martha scanned the crowd, her heart quickening when she spotted Ethan in his blue and white uniform, practicing throws with teammates. She hesitated at the edge of the field, suddenly uncertain. Then Ethan looked up, his eyes sweeping the gathering spectators. When he saw her, his entire face lit up with a joy so pure, it brought tears to Martha's eyes. "Grandma!" he shouted, breaking away from his team and running toward her at full speed. Martha braced herself as Ethan crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist with the unrestrained enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. "You came. Dad said you might be too busy," Ethan said, looking up at her with his father's hazel eyes, but filled with an innocence that made Martha's heart ache. "I would never miss your game, sweetheart," she assured him, smoothing back a cowlick that refused to stay in place beneath his cap. "I've been looking forward to it all week." Ethan beamed, then suddenly turned serious. "Are you still mad at Dad? He's been really grumpy, and Mom keeps giving him these looks when she thinks I can't see." Martha chose her words carefully. "Your dad and I have some grown-up things to work out, but that has nothing to do with how much I love you. Nothing ever will." This seemed to satisfy Ethan, whose attention was already being pulled back to the field by his coach's whistle. "I gotta go. We're playing the Tigers today. They're really good, but Coach says we can beat them if we remember everything we practiced." "Then you'd better not keep your team waiting," Martha said, giving him one more quick hug. "I'll be cheering for you." As Ethan ran back to join his teammates, Martha scanned the sidelines for a place to sit. That's when she saw them, Michael and Lisa, setting up folding chairs near the third base line. Lisa noticed her first, raising a tentative hand in greeting. Michael's gaze followed his wife's, and for a moment he and Martha simply looked at each other across the distance. Martha squared her shoulders and walked toward them, determined to maintain the fragile peace of this day for Ethan's sake. She had brought her own canvas folding chair and set it up a respectful distance from theirs, close enough to be considered part of the same family group by observers, but far enough to avoid forced conversation. "Martha," Lisa greeted her warmly. "I'm so glad you could make it. Ethan's been talking about nothing else since yesterday." "I wouldn't have missed it," Martha replied, settling into her chair. She nodded politely to Michael, who returned the gesture stiffly. The awkward moment was broken by the announcement of the starting lineup. Ethan was playing second base today, a position he had been practicing for weeks. When his name was called, all three adults cheered, momentarily united in their pride. As the game progressed, the tension between Martha and Michael gradually eased, replaced by their shared investment in Ethan's performance. When he made a good play, they exchanged glances of mutual approval. When he struck out in the third inning, they both winced in sympathy. Between the fourth and fifth innings, Lisa excused herself to visit the concession stand. Michael remained silent for a long moment, watching the players warm up, before finally turning to Martha. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I didn't think you'd fight back like that." Martha kept her eyes on the field. "You underestimated how much that house means to me. It's not just walls and a roof, Michael. It's where your father and I built our life together. It's where we raised you." Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly. "Thomas Reynolds. He's more than just a friend from grief support, isn't he? He's a good man who recognized what was happening and offered to help," Martha replied simply. "Something I never thought I'd need protection from my own son." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken hurt. In the distance, Ethan was laughing with a teammate, oblivious to the gulf between his father and grandmother. "My company is in trouble," Michael finally admitted, his voice low so that passing parents wouldn't overhear. "The Westfield project failed. Investors pulled out, the market shifted. I'm facing bankruptcy if I can't secure a major win soon." Martha turned to look at him directly. "And that justified what you did to me." Michael had the decency to look away. "I was desperate. The developers made an offer for the entire block that would have solved everything. When you refused to sell," he trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. "You could have talked to me, Michael. Really talked to me, not just demanded that I fall in line with your plans. Would you have sold if I had?" he challenged. Martha considered this honestly. "Probably not, but I might have found another way to help you. A loan against my savings, perhaps. We could have faced it as a family instead of as adversaries." Michael's shoulders slumped slightly. "It's too late now anyway. The developers pulled their offer when they realized the property assemblage was falling apart. One of the other homeowners got cold feet too. The umpire called for the start of the fifth inning, and their attention returned to the game. Ethan's team was down by 2 runs, but the boys' spirits remained high, their coach offering encouragement from the sidelines. As Lisa returned with drinks and snacks, the conversation shifted to safer topics. Ethan's upcoming school science fair, the unusually mild weather they'd been having, a new restaurant that had opened downtown. It was stilted, cautious interaction, but it was interaction nonetheless. In the bottom of the 6th inning, with 2 outs and bases loaded, Ethan stepped up to bat. The weight of potential victory rested on his small shoulders. Martha found herself holding her breath as he settled into his stance, the bat looking almost too big for him. The first pitch came in high, ball 1. The second, he swung at and missed. On the third pitch, Ethan connected with a solid crack that sent the ball soaring over the second baseman's head. The crowd erupted as Ethan ran to first base and his teammates rounded the bases. 3 runs scored before the ball made it back to the infield, putting Ethan's team ahead. In that moment of triumph, Martha and Michael both leapt to their feet, cheering wildly. Their eyes met in shared joy and pride, a brief, unguarded moment of connection that transcended their conflict. When the game ended, Ethan's team victorious by a single run, the boy raced over to his family, still flushed with excitement. "Did you see that hit, Grandma? Did you see it, Dad?" "We sure did, champion," Michael said, lifting his son in a celebratory hug. "That was incredible. The best hit I've seen all season," Martha agreed, her heart full at the sight of Ethan's happiness. The team was gathering for post-game pizza, and Ethan looked between his father and grandmother, suddenly hesitant. "Grandma, are you coming too? Please." Martha glanced at Michael, uncertain. It was his turn to make a gesture. After a moment's pause, Michael nodded. "We'd like it if you joined us, Mom, if you want to." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was an opening, a small crack in the wall that had formed between them. "I'd like that," Martha said softly. As they walked toward the parking lot together, Martha, Michael, Lisa, and Ethan between them, chattering excitedly about his game-winning hit, Martha felt a cautious hope stir within her. The relationship with her son had been damaged, perhaps irreparably changed, but not completely destroyed. Like her beloved home, it had weathered a storm and remained standing, albeit with cracks that would need careful tending. Later that evening, after the pizza celebration, where conversation had remained civil if somewhat guarded, Martha sat once again on her porch swing. The street was quiet, most families already settled in for the night. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, checking in as he had each night since helping her reclaim her home. "How was the baseball game?" he'd written. Martha thought carefully before responding. "Ethan's team won. And maybe, just maybe, so did I." She put her phone away and gazed up at the familiar night sky. The house behind her stood solid and secure, its foundation unshaken despite recent turmoil. Inside were the memories of yesterday and the possibilities of tomorrow. Outside was a world of uncertainty, of relationships to rebuild and trust to re-establish. Martha pushed the swing gently with her foot, setting it in motion. The rhythmic creaking was a lullaby she had known for 40 years, a constant in a life that had seen both profound joy and devastating loss. Whatever came next, whether slow reconciliation with Michael or a new family dynamic altogether, she would face it with the resilience that had carried her this far. That house wasn't just Paredes and Teljado's walls and roof. It was indeed the heart of a lifetime. And Martha Donovan had proven that the heart, both the home's and her own, was worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of family, betrayal, and resilience, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like Martha's to life. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest strength comes from standing your ground with dignity and grace.